Welcome back to Wyckmoore.
The Mystical Realm of Wyckmoore, Part 10. The Thing That Hunts Light. The shadow kept growing. At first Rowan thought it was just a trick of the Vaneway's endless dark, but then it moved, wrong, too smooth, bending around the rivers of light instead of cutting through them. The Starborn's voice was low and taut. "Don't speak. It listens to breath." Rowan held hers without thinking. Her pulse thundered in her ears as the darkness began to take shape. It was thin. That was the first thing she noticed. Tall as a mountain but gaunt, its limbs impossibly long, bending in ways that felt incorrect. Where its skin should have been was instead a shifting film like shadows sliding under ice. Its head, if it could be called that, was faceless, but a single line split down the center. From that crack, faint pale light leaked, flickering like the last glow of a dying coal. As it drifted closer, the glowing threads of the Vaneway shrank back from it, dimming like they feared its touch. Rowan's whisper was barely sound. "What is it?" The Starborn's eyes never left the thing. "A light eater. Born when a first ember shard dies without finding a host. It devours the glow of worlds and leaves only cold behind." Rowan felt the hatchling twitch in its sleep, a faint whimper in its throat. The creature's head snapped toward the sound, the crack in its face widening just slightly, and Rowan saw something inside. Not eyes, but rings of endless darkness spinning inward. Who wanted the hatchling? The Starborn shifted their grip on her hand. "We run. And whatever happens, do not let go." They stepped forward and the world convulsed. The threads of light surged beneath their feet, flaring bright as the Starborn pulled her into a sprint. Behind them, the Light Eater followed, its movements both slow and terribly fast, like it bent the space between them to close the distance. Every time Rowan looked back, the crack in its head was wider, and the dim light inside was pulsing faster, as though it was tasting their glow from afar. The first ember loomed ahead, larger now, heat pouring off it in waves. "If we can reach its fire," the Starborn shouted over the soundless roar of the Vaneway, "it will not follow. It fears beginnings." But Rowan could feel it. The Light Eater was closing the gap. One more heartbeat and it would be within reach. The stand in the Vaneway. The light thread under Rowan's feet buckled as the Light Eater's shadow stretched forward, clawing toward them. The Starborn yanked her close, their voice sharp with urgency. "Take the hatchling. Keep running. Don't look back." Before she could protest, they thrust the small, warm bundle into her arms. The hatchling stirred, letting out a faint trill, and the Light Eater's faceless head snapped toward the sound like a predator catching scent. The Starborn stepped between them and the creature, their forms suddenly brighter, as if their body was drinking in every drop of starlight around them. "Rowan, go." He hesitated. "I'm not leaving you." "You are. Or none of us make it." Something in their tone cut through her panic, not cold but final. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who had already accepted what came next. Rowan turned and ran. The hatchling pressed its head against her collarbone, whimpering softly. The glowing threads rose to meet her steps, almost lifting her along, but the heat from the first ember still felt too far away. Behind her, light exploded. She glanced over her shoulder despite her promise and froze mid-stride. The Starborn had shed their human shape entirely, becoming a being of pure light and razor-sharp arcs of energy. They struck the Light Eater with a blade of radiance so bright it burned Rowan's eyes. The creature reeled back, the crack in its head snapping shut with a soundless shudder. But it didn't fall. It absorbed the blow, its body rippling as if tasting the Starborn's essence. The Starborn's voice echoed in her mind now, a mental push as strong as any shove. Run, Emberbearer. The veinway around her warped, threads twisting into a bridge that carried her toward the pulsing heat of the first ember. She didn't dare slow down even as the light behind her dimmed, as if the Starborn's glow was being eaten piece by piece. When she finally reached the ember's heat, she stumbled and collapsed to her knees. The hatchling whimpered again, curling tighter against her. The veinway behind her went silent. She waited. No footsteps. No voice. No Starborn. Only the first ember's low, endless hum. The Keeper of the Ember. The first ember towered above Rowan, a sphere of molten gold wrapped in slow-moving rings of crystal. Its light wasn't gentle like Ashwing's glow, or piercing like the Starborn's. It was heavy. It pressed against her skin like deep water. Rowan swallowed hard. What now? She murmured to the hatchling. That's when she heard it. A deep rhythmic sound. Subtract, subtract. From the far side of the ember's glow emerged a figure. At first she thought it was a man wrapped in tattered robes, but then he stepped closer, and she realized the robes were molten chains still glowing at the links. His eyes were not eyes at all, but two shards of pale stone, glowing faintly from within. A curved staff rested in his hand, its tip hooked around a fragment of crystal that hummed in time with the ember's heartbeat. Another bearer, the figure said, voice like rock grinding underfoot. And so soon after the last was taken. Rowan stiffened. You saw what happened? The Keeper nodded once, slow. I felt it. The Starborn's light winking out. Few have the will to face a Light Eater. Fewer still win. Ashwing stirred in her arms, peeking at the figure with wide molten gold eyes. The Keeper's gaze lingered on the hatchling. Ah. So that's where the spark went. Rowan stepped back a little. You're not going to hurt us. A faint smile cracked the Keeper's stone features. Child, if I wanted the hatchling, I'd take it. But I am here to keep the ember burning, not to strip it bare. If you mean to protect that dragon, you'll need more than luck and a Starborn's blessing. He tapped the staff against the ground and a ripple of heat swept through the space. Behind him, a new path formed. A bridge of ember crystal leading away into another dark stretch of the veinway. Kulme. The ember will grant you a shard of its fire, but only if you prove worthy. The trial will not be kind. The ember's trial. The Keeper led Rowan and Ashwing to the base of the ember, where its light shimmered against the veinway's black stone. A perfect circle had been carved into the floor, its edges lined with runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. Step inside, the Keeper said. And do not leave the circle until the trial ends, or you fail. Rowan hesitated. What happens if I fail? The Keeper didn't answer, he just watched her with those stone glow eyes. That silence was somehow worse than any threat. With Ashwing clinging to her shoulder, she stepped into the circle. The moment her foot crossed the rune line, the world dissolved. The veinway was gone. The Keeper was gone. Even the ember's hum had vanished. She stood in a vast plain of black glass under a sky filled with burning stars. Her reflection shimmered beneath her feet, distorted by waves of heat. A voice, not the Keeper's but something older, spoke all around her. The fire is not given. It is taken. In front of her, 3 shapes rose from the black glass. A shadowed figure in her own shape. Same face, same stance, but with eyes like the light-eater's crack of nothingness. A twisting storm of fire that roared without smoke, spinning fast enough to pull the air from her lungs. A massive stone gate with no visible hinges or handle, carved with lines that glowed faintly gold. The voice came again. Only one will open the way. Rowan's chest tightened. Was this a trick? She glanced at Ashwing, but the hatchling was gone. She was alone. The shadow version of her stepped closer, smiling with her mouth but not her warmth. The firestorm drew nearer too, its pull growing stronger. The stone gate just waited. Rowan clenched her fists. She could attack the shadow self. She could step into the storm. She could try to force the gate. The gate of burning stone. Rowan took a deep breath and turned away from both the shadow self and the firestorm. The shadow smirked as if it already knew she'd made the wrong choice. The firestorm screamed with sudden fury, its winds clawing at her back, but she pressed on. The stone gate loomed higher the closer she got, until she had to crane her neck to see its top. Up close she could make out carvings she hadn't seen before, scenes of dragons not unlike Ashwing carrying shards of light in their talons. One carving showed a figure that looked unsettlingly like her, standing before the same gate. She placed her palms against the cold surface. It felt impossibly heavy, like the weight of a whole mountain pressed into one slab. Her arms strained, legs braced, and the stone didn't budge. Then the voice returned, soft but sharp enough to cut through her thoughts. You do not take the ember's gift with strength alone. Her fingers slipped against the smooth surface, but then she noticed something. Where her hand had been, the stone was warmer. The glowing lines in the carvings were just a fraction brighter. It's not about force, it's about will, she thought. Rowan closed her eyes. She thought of Ashwing, tiny, fragile, and entirely dependent on her. She thought of the Keeper, of the Starborn sacrifice, of every step she had taken through this strange dream realm. The warmth spread from her palms into her arms, into her chest, until it felt like she was breathing molten air. The gate shuddered. Dust rained from its edges. A crack split the center, spilling golden light so bright it made her eyes water. When it finally swung open, the light poured over her like fire and rain at once, searing and soothing. The voice whispered one last time. Then burn with purpose. The black glass plane vanished. She was back in the Vaneway, kneeling inside the rune circle. Ashwing was on her shoulder again, purring with a faint ember glow in his chest. The Keeper watched her, head tilted. You opened it, he said, not as a question. Good. The shard is yours. Through the hollow roads. The Keeper gave no celebration, no words of praise. Only a small crystal, glowing from within like a captured sunrise, rested in his palm. Rowan took it carefully. The moment her fingers closed around it, a heat, steady, not burning, spread through her chest. Ashwing's tiny claws dug into her shoulder, his own glow pulsing in sync with the shard. The Keeper's stone lips curled into something that might have been approval. Go, he said. The hollow roads will not wait for you. The hollow roads began as a narrow tunnel that twisted away from the Ember's chamber. At first the walls were smooth and dark, the air dry and still. But soon the rock began to shimmer faintly, thin, spidery veins of silver running like lightning under the surface. Ashwing flicked his tail nervously. "I don't like this smell," he murmured in her thoughts. It wasn't exactly a smell, more like the memory of fire and rot clinging to her tongue. The tunnel opened into a cavern so vast the ceiling disappeared into shadow. Bridges of bone-white stone arched across black chasms that swallowed sound. Every step felt too loud. Every breath felt borrowed. Halfway across one of the bridges, Rowan saw movement below, shapes shifting in the dark, too large to be lizards, too quick to be human. She kept walking, but her heartbeat thudded in her ears. On the far side of the bridge, a figure waited. Hooded, cloaked in strips of black leather, their face hidden behind a mask carved to resemble a snarling dragon. A silver chain wound around their arm, ending in a hook that scraped softly against the stone. "Starborn girl," the figure said, their voice low and almost amused. "You've got something I want." Ashwing hissed, wings flaring. Rowan stepped back, but the bridge behind her was gone. Only open air and the black drop remained. The Bridge of Teeth. The masked stranger stepped forward, chain dragging along the stone with a sound like distant thunder. The silver hook at its end caught the faint cavern light, gleaming hungrily. Rowan's pulse hammered, but she didn't move back. The shard in her hand seemed to thrum with each heartbeat, warming her blood. Ashwing's claws dug into her shoulder, his wings trembling, not from fear but from a coiled, ready energy. "If you want it," Rowan said, her voice steadier than she felt, "you'll have to take it." The stranger chuckled, a low, dry sound. "I intend to." They lunged. The chain lashed out in a blur of silver, but Rowan pivoted to the side. The hook scraped sparks off the bridge, and the masked figure twisted to follow, moving far faster than their size suggested. Ashwing leapt from her shoulder in a flash of ember light, swooping low to rake at the stranger's mask with his claws. The figure snarled and swung the chain upward, forcing him to bank away, but the distraction gave Rowan her opening. She pressed the shard against her palm. Heat surged up her arm, and for an instant she thought she might burn from the inside out. But then the warmth shaped itself into something tangible. A blade of golden fire sprang to life in her grip, flickering like the breath of a forge. The masked figure paused, head tilting. "Ah, so the gate opened for you." They swung the chain again, faster, the hook whistling toward her throat. Rowan ducked, the fire blade slicing through the links. The chain fell in two pieces, the hook clattering to the bridge and sliding over the edge into the dark. For the first time the stranger stepped back. Not in fear, but in something closer to curiosity. "You're not ready yet," they said. "But you will be. I'll be waiting." And just like that they stepped backward into the chasm. And vanished as though swallowed by the dark itself. The bridge shuddered. Cracks raced along the bone-white stone beneath Rowan's feet. Ashwing swooped back to her shoulder, his emberlight flaring. "Run." Into the hollow. The cracks split wide under Rowan's boots, stone groaning like the ribs of some ancient beast. The gap yawned ahead of her, the same black nothing the stranger had vanished into. Ashwing's tail lashed against her neck. "Rowan, no." But she was already moving. Not away from the danger but toward it. The shard's heat pulsed in her hand, steady and insistent, as if it understood what she meant to do. She didn't give herself the chance to. She sprinted the last few steps and hurled herself into the void. The air was ice against her skin. Her stomach lurched, the cavern walls streaking past in a blur of darkness. Ashwing dove beside her, wings folded tight, his ember light a small star in the deep. She expected to fall forever, but the air suddenly thickened, slowing her descent. Mist swirled around her, tasting faintly of copper and rain. Shapes emerged from the dark, massive roots as wide as towers, twisting in impossible patterns, glowing faintly from within. Her boots touched something soft, moss but warm, almost alive. The ground here pulsed gently, as if she were standing on the back of a sleeping giant. A low hum rose from the mist. It wasn't sound exactly, but it pressed against her bones, whispering something old and dangerous. Ashwing hovered close to her ear. "We're in the hollow's heart, and it knows we're here." Ahead, lanterns bloomed one by one in the mist, forming a crooked path. And in the glow of the nearest one, the masked stranger waited, motionless but no longer armed. "You jumped," they said, as if testing the shape of the words. "Good. Then you're not afraid to lose the sky." They turned without waiting for a reply and began walking deeper into the hollow. The lantern path. The lantern light wavered, casting long, crooked shadows across the mossy ground. Each one looked almost alive, twisting, bending in ways the shapes shouldn't. Rowan followed, her boots sinking slightly into the warm moss with each step. It gave under her weight like the flesh of some sleeping beast, but never swallowed her whole. Ashwing padded along her shoulder, his wings tucked close, eyes darting between the stranger and the fog. The masked figure's steps were silent. No crunch of moss, no shift of breath. Only the faint jingle of broken chain where the weapon had been severed. The path wound between colossal roots that arched overhead like the ribs of a cathedral. Some pulsed faintly with inner light, threads of gold running through their bark. Others were black and cracked, as if burned from within. They passed a root with a split wide enough to peer inside. Rowan glanced in and saw something moving in the golden sap, shapes that almost looked like faces drifting through the glow before vanishing. Ashwing's claws tightened. "Don't look too long. This place likes to keep what catches its eye." The lanterns led them to a clearing. In its center stood a pool of perfectly still water, black as obsidian. The stranger stopped at the edge and turned toward Rowan. "This is the hollow's mirror," they said. "Step in and it will show you what you came here for. But be warned, it will take something in return." The mist pressed closer around them as if waiting for her choice. The hollow's mirror. The still water reflected nothing. No lanterns, no trees, not even Rowan herself. It was like standing on the edge of an open sky at midnight. The masked stranger said nothing more, only tilted their head, a silent dare. Rowan tightened her grip on the shard. Ashwing coiled his tail around her neck, his ember light dimming. "If you go in, I can't pull you back. You'll have to find your own way out." She nodded once and stepped forward. The water gave way beneath her foot with the quiet sound of glass shattering. Yet there was no splash, no ripple. Instead, she sank soundlessly as if the surface had swallowed her whole. The cold was immediate, wrapping around her chest like a fist. Her ears rang with whispers, none of them in any language she knew. The darkness pressed tighter, until she couldn't tell if her eyes were open or closed. Then light. Not lantern light, but a sky the color of molten gold. She stood in a wide plain of white grass, each blade humming softly in the wind. In the distance, a figure was waiting. Tall, cloaked, its outline shifting like smoke. And behind it, wings stretched wide, vast, star-dusted wings she recognized from dreams she never understood. The voice that came was not one voice, but many layered together. You carry the gate's shard, child of ash. Do you know what it costs to bear it?
Thank you for listening. If you would like to be notified about upcoming releases to the Wyckmoore series, please subscribe.